Running Wild with Christine, Sex, Success, and Other Slippery Rabbit Holes. Episode 14 on bad feelings and expectations in relationships with Anita Cassidy. Hi, and welcome to Running Wild with Christine. You know what we do here by now, so let's just jump into today's wonderful starter point for our rabbit hole. Today we are back with Anita. Hi.
Hi, Christine. How are you?
I am good. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Very well. Nice and sunny here in London.
Nice. It's very stormy here in Switzerland, so we'll just deal with that. Basically, Anita and I are actually kind of excited because we get to meet in a couple of weeks.
We do.
Which is going to be very cool. We're going to be in London. I'm pretty sure this episode is going to air. Let me see. It'll air before we're in London. So do you want to say something about this social?
Well, we're meeting at a relationship social that I run as part of the community I founded last year, so Nomo. And that is open to everyone, basically, that is engaged with kind of conscious relationship choices and developing extraordinary conscious relationships. That's a social that takes place in Waterloo. So if you are interested in coming along and meeting Christine and myself, you can register at nomoradicalrelationships.club. That's nomoradicalrelationships.club, and come and have a chat about what the kind of thing we're talking about today.
Awesome. I'm going to be putting all the links in the description of this episode so you guys can reach us, but I'm super excited. But for today, we decided to talk about bad feelings.
Yeah, stuff. The hard stuff. The stuff that most of us don't ever want to think about. And we're going to talk about that in some detail, I think.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's interesting because the last time we talked about having, hard conversations when things are good. And now we're going to be talking about hard conversations when things are less good.
Yeah, because I think at the end of the day, all relationships go through difficult times. And the idea that we often have that the minute you've met the one or the right person for this point in time, that there are no problems, there are no major issues, is a really problematic one.
Yeah.
Because difficult feelings and difficult situations are just the day-to-day norm in most of our relationship lives.
Yeah, and something that you said when we were prepping for this episode made me laugh so much. You're like, I just prefer to feel good and be happy. I'm like, yes.
Absolutely. I really do. I think that's perfectly okay. I think most of us know we just prefer to feel good, and I prefer to be feeling loved by my partner. I prefer feeling loving towards that person.
Yep.
I don't like feeling like they are being an asshole. I don't like feeling like I'm behaving badly and struggling. I don't like it, and I think that's where the whole feeling a signpost thing comes up. It's like, actually, okay, that's difficult, but what is that telling me about what I need? And that's where that comes in.
And I think it's so easy in today's day and age to sort of shove feelings deep down and be like, but no, on surface, everything looks good, and look how great I'm doing, look how great we are, and like blah, blah, blah. And that's actually the crux of like the problems getting worse, is that not addressing, right, well, this bad feeling I'm having isn't a sign of like, we're not meant for each other, or I don't like you, or you don't like me. It's just a sign of something is off. Like, how do we recalibrate whatever we need to sort of talk about, or wherever is this particular, in this instance, bad feeling coming from?
Yeah, because I think the bad feeling is, like you say, I think the tendency is to think that a bad feeling or a series of bad feelings mean that the relationship is seriously, fundamentally wrong. We just assume, right, there's something wrong here and I have to fix it, or ignore something, or like there's something wrong with bad. But actually the bad is often the springboard to better.
Yeah.
It really is. And I think that is really where I found that being a bit more consciously engaged with my relationship and actually making it a practice to not bury and ignore like I used to. I definitely used to do that. I was a big withholder, a big withdrawer. It's like, no, I'm just going to ignore that. I'm going to walk away. Silent treatment, just ignore, repress.
Yeah.
By going, actually, I'm going to take a deep breath and set some time aside, or discuss this as and when it happens.
Yeah.
I've really noticed that actually the hard work of doing that ends up with me feeling better and the relationship being better as a result.
But I think that it's so funny how we talk about these concepts when it comes to self-development and careers and everything else. We're like, failing is just like you actually trying and blah, blah. You have all these motivational posters that are like, it's how you get up. It's how you pick it up again.
Yeah.
Why is that not the conversation we're having with relationships?
It's interesting, actually. You're absolutely right. Because it is. It's okay in certain contexts, isn't it? Like I say, in work or other parts of your life, like say making mistakes or feeling frustrated or feeling bad is often a springboard to change. But actually in relationships, it is often just seen as there's a big problem here. Yeah. And it can often spiral because often there are other things sitting underneath it as well. Mm-hmm. I don't know what your experiences are of kind of difficult feelings. I've got a couple of recent examples of kind of having to work through the difficult stuff. I don't know if there's something you want to share first.
Well, for me, I mean, because I've been single for the last 2.5 years, they're not going to be that recent. But I think that for me, the biggest thing is that whenever I have a bad feeling, especially in the last, like, let's not go back to Liam because that's like millions of years ago and I'm sick of talking about him. But I think whenever I'm having, when I feel like, oh God, it's just coming to me and we didn't even prep this in our conversations, but I have a person in my life that's been a friend for a long time and he's a very important person in my life, but not romantically. So I think this is actually a very interesting example as well. Yeah. And I've had some bad feelings or like I'm not sure how I feel towards him at the moment. There's like a lot of things that we've never said to each other and never dealt with and never treated, and we sort of like keep going along this path of like avoidance or playing like we don't. I mean, I'm not sure. This is the thing. I don't know if he notices that there's something wrong. I feel like there's something wrong, and I'm not sure what it is.
Okay.
And so that conversation I've avoided, and I'm trying to think of like, ways to approach a conversation that I don't know where it's going. And I think that's sort of like a precursor to every difficult conversation that you have towards bad feelings is like, shit, like if I open this Pandora's box, where's it going to go?
Exactly. And do you know what really strikes me about what you've just said, actually, is the fact that you said 2 or 3 times there, it's been sitting around for a while.
Yeah.
Didn't treat it. You said not treat it.
Yeah.
We did. And all that's happened, actually, is those bad feelings have gotten worse.
Exactly.
And that's, we think by repressing or avoiding, but it'll just go away. But what it ever does is get a lot bigger.
Yeah.
A lot messier.
And I think it makes you more and more lonely in that issue because you sort of like drift away from the person. Like you get into your bubble of like, I don't know if he feels this or he, she, or anything in between. Is it in my head? Blah, blah, blah. And I think that's like, if I was in a romantic relationship with him, I would actually feel more comfortable talking about it because of the work you and I have been doing. Not because that's what, relationships are like, but I feel like I would have already said we need to have open conversations.
Yeah, because you know that actually in romantic relationships right now, I know that best practice is talk about these things.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, your framework there is that in a friendship, I might therefore let that person get away more with that kind of bad behaviour than I would if we were romantically involved. Yeah, and it gets weird kind of dichotomy between, well, if it's a friendship, I do these things, and when it's a relationship, I do those things. And actually, the best practice sits across all those connections, doesn't it? Really, in an ideal world.
Exactly.
But there isn't such a thing as an ideal world or an ideal connection. So
no, and this is exactly where I catch myself not practicing what I preach. And I'm like,
oh gosh, I do that all the time. It's just all. I mean, it's that lovely idea that you're on the airplane traveling from London to New York is basically never totally on course. Yeah. It's always slightly, as an airplane travels, it's never totally on course. It's always slightly off course, basically. Yeah. And I feel a bit like that most of the time in my relationship life. It's like, I know where I need to get, but I'm always basically a little bit off course. I'm constantly adjusting. You're constantly adjusting. Yeah. But your point about that loneliness and that drifting away, that's basically exactly what happened to me in the last week. There's some difficult feelings going on with, Andrea, who's, I guess, my kind of primary partner of the last couple of years. Yeah. And it was a really interesting set of scenarios where you're basically like, we need to talk about a couple of things, but because it's difficult, you think, oh, I'll wait. Yeah. But it does. My tendency is to then pull away. Yeah. But he's basically been mirroring that. He's basically like, well, I thought you needed, and essentially the conversation ends up being, well, I thought you needed some space. And I'm like, well, I was pulling away hoping you'd notice.
And you'd come closer.
And we've just been, like you said, that drifting away by not discussing what we needed to discuss.
Yeah.
Further and further away from each other. And then that kind of anxiety / resentment builds in. We're like, well, why haven't you noticed that I'm not here and I'm feeling sad? But he's like, well, I thought what you needed was this because in the past you did. I'm like, well, there's a couple of things going on there. Like in the past, maybe, but I would always say if I wanted for some space.
Yeah.
But you've gone to your default response. I've gone to my default response, despite all the consciousness in the world.
Yeah.
Even being part of a community of people and writing constantly about developing extraordinary conscious relationships, I'm still making these mistakes. So we're talking weekly,
Yeah, and I think that's the main thing that we were, because we were talking about those difficult feelings and addressing them in relationships, and basically it all comes from where that fear stems from, and it's either fear of loss or fear of change most of the time. And it's so funny that that's what we fear, when in fact the fact that we're not addressing them changes the relationship and brings in a bit of loss, because you lost the time, you lost the connection, you lose the thing you spend so much time building. You basically retrograde it a little bit every time you pull away. And so
I think it's really powerful to kind of take that step back and see that actually again you're creating through your kind of those kind of unconscious behaviors or less positive behaviors. You are creating the scenario that you fear.
Yeah, exactly.
You're essentially creating that. You're essentially making a fertile ground to have that change and loss happen. And interestingly as well, it's that whole idea that actually all change must be loss or all change must be bad, rather than the idea that actually change can be for the better.
Yeah.
And in my experience of dealing with difficult feelings, that it does usually lead to stronger, closer, better connection with that person. And the same way that you might find with your friend that actually talking about it would have helped address your relationship and actually develop that connection more.
Absolutely. It's hard.
And it's hard because the fear of loss. If I speak of this, I don't know what's going to happen, and the person could literally turn around and go, do you know what? I've been feeling that, and I think what needs to happen is, and we all hear it in our heads, this needs to end. Yeah. And that's what sits at the bottom of it, I think.
Yeah, especially, and I think it's this is why I was sort of refractory to putting a difference between friendships and romantic relationships, in the sense that this isn't a passing friendship. This is someone who means a lot to me. So in that sense, it's the exact same scenario, minus the sort of societal structure around it. And so I think for me that was it's very difficult to understand the difference in my behavior, because usually and this is what my friend Sunny said in the last episode we taped, that I'm the same with my friends as I am in relationships. I'm basically the same person in general. There's a lot of people who are more private in their friendships and more open in their relationships, just due to the nature of my personality. I tend to be quite similar. But with this particular person, I'm like, so we've never established a way of dealing with problems, because we've never really come across any problems so far. Yeah. So now not only do I have to address this difficult topic, but I also have to create a channel of communication from scratch with someone that I never prepped for it. And this for me is like the weirdest thing, because usually I would prep, or if I'd met him later in life, I would have been like, this is who I am. If you don't like it, these are the tools.
This is how I deal with problems when they come up. Because again, I mean, it's kind of, I think it's something we've talked about before in terms of difficult conversations, but it's about when you're first getting to know someone. So taking that kind of new relationship energy, the beginning of a friendship, because even friendships when they start are usually sparked by a lot of energy and excitement. It's like, wow, I met this person, I really like them. Yeah. Whether it's friendship or romantic and sexual, it's about saying, actually, at the start of this, here's a lot of what we share, but if and when there are problems, how do we, you and I, talk about those and kind of mutually agree on a way that you deal with conflict and concerns with each other? Yeah. Use that positive energy, use the beginning excitement. Yeah. as and when this changes, let's talk about change now. Let's talk about loss now. Let's manage our expectations about how this is going to be moving forward, so that we all know. Therefore, you don't have to build that channel
later
from scratch.
Yeah,
when you're already under emotional pressure from the fact that you're feeling crappy.
Exactly. And I love that we discussed that, because I see myself doing it in current scenarios. People that I'm meeting now, I'm like, this is how, you know, and I see the impact it has on the strength and the positive outcomes of my new relationships. But this is a person I've known since I was like a very early teenager. So I'm just like,
so you've got a whole lot of history and a relationship that's been built basically on an old set of foundations. Foundations that you built when you didn't really know how to build foundations, and that's fine. But how do you go back and then kind of add some new stuff there, or deal with some stuff that doesn't get too messy?
Exactly. And I think this is why the question is pertinent, because I think that a lot of people listening who haven't necessarily been working on conscious relationships might find themselves in those kinds of couples or whatever setup you have, even friendships, and it's kind of comforting to me to know, in sort of a very Schadenfreude way, it's comforting to know that this is a struggle for you as well, who, like you said,
absolutely
works on it all the time. So what do we do?
Like you say, I think it's about acknowledging that, you know, you didn't have these skills before, and that actually the skills of dealing with difficult feelings and also communicating in relationships, all types of relationships, are things we learn as we go along, and that we're going to make mistakes. You know, I think we were talking before, you know, the recent scenario with me, in that there's been a fair bit of conflict recently, I guess, around kind of both Andrea and I dealing with a lot of kind of personal stress and life change and frustrations. And almost every conversation in the last couple of weeks has been a difficult one. You know, we're both stressed, we're a bit snappy. I've been on a few dates recently, so there's this kind of, and I haven't been for a long time. So again, it adds into the mix this sense of, well, he's feeling a bit unsettled, but doesn't necessarily know how to deal with that. And we are, I guess my learning from that in terms of talking to him is about thinking, well, we're learning how to do this again. You know, every time is new, because it's always a new context, it's always a new set of circumstances. You might have learned some stuff from before that helps, but actually it's giving each other plenty of space to make mistakes. Like when we were having an argument recently, and it was an argument, you know, it's kind of raised voices and anger and frustration coming out. And I'm not able right now with those difficult feelings what I can't do right now is in the moment stop myself and go, I'm behaving in a bad way, and actually snapping and shouting and being defensive or withdrawing isn't helpful right now. So I do those things. I snap, I'm defensive, I withdraw, I do all the things that I know I shouldn't be doing. But what I tend to notice is that either within that conversation, either on the phone or in person, within 15, 20 minutes, I can go, do you know what? There was probably a better way of dealing with that, or there was a gentler way of communicating that to you. I can do it. I can't do it in the moment yet. I'm still learning. And will I ever? I don't know. But at the moment, I can't. But I am aware. I'm learning to basically say, I see that wasn't helpful. I see that what that led to was then you getting defensive or you being upset, and it's gotten worse. But I'm able to take a step back now, 20 minutes later or half an hour later, I phone him back in one scenario, or I go to the bathroom in the restaurant, I come back and say, actually, do you know what, you're right, you know, I do respond in that way and that isn't helpful. And I own that mistake. I'm gentle, I try and be gentle on myself about the fact that I could have handled it better. And he really appreciates that. I think me saying to him, actually, do you know what, I could have handled that better. You know, I'm behaving in a way that's a bit bitchy or unhelpful or nasty, and me owning that mistake gives him the space to say, and actually, you know what, I could have been kinder in responding to your obvious upset or distress or evident feelings of frustration and annoyance.
And I think that's
and then the tension's all gone. You know, it really is. It melts away because we've looked at it and owned our own part in the process.
And I think that's like actually I'm thinking about like a few situations where that's actually such an easy first tool. Like if you really are, let's say this person that I'm talking to, the friend is let's say we were in a relationship, I think that would be the easiest way to start it. If if I'm putting myself in the shoes of a listener who's in a relationship that doesn't have the tools in place, just, this friend of mine, he sent me a text that clearly pinched me. Like I felt a pinch in my stomach, and I was like, and it came from a good place from his point. It wasn't a nasty text, but it was like, oh, I don't feel good about you saying that to me. Okay. And I feel like if I had just texted that in response saying, hey, actually, I don't feel really good when you text me these things. I don't really know why. But like, try not to do that or something. It could have been just like an easy first sort of inkling as to now we're sort of starting to communicate. It was something along the lines of like, oh, this person reminded me of you because of this. Okay. And I was just like, why does that remind you of me? Like, why is that is that what you see me as, or is that what you qualify my, it was just kind of like an assumption.
Quite defensive and upset. And I think it's about being able to learning certain phrases, saying, actually, I've noticed that when you said that, I felt X.
Yeah.
Or when you said that, I feel Y. Or when you do this, I feel like that. Mm-hmm. And actually try, just kind of, and saying, I don't really know how to respond, or I'm feeling a bit uncomfortable, but I don't know how to say.
Yeah.
It's almost like you have to say that you don't have the skills. It's almost like part of developing the skills is acknowledging that you don't have them quite yet.
Yeah.
And what you're doing is trying to develop them. And it's almost like you say to your friend, you know what? Communicating with my friends openly is really important to me. And I've noticed that I'm not as open and honest with you as I'd like to be.
Yeah.
Can we have a talk about, how we can be a bit more honest and open with each other?
Yeah.
Or how can we create space together to do that?
And
how can we develop these skills together?
Mm-hmm. And instead of, and this is why I felt it was sort of key, that moment of maybe that moment that I ignored, that I saw and that I ignored. Yeah. I think it would have been such a nice way to open that door without, bursting, which is what I fear is going to happen if I continue.
Crashing through with all
sitting down in front of him and going, we don't talk.
Because it's reaction, isn't it? It's like an instant, you're tapping away on the phone and the texts start rolling back and you're like, or you're shouting at someone in a restaurant.
Well, this is it. Like I didn't even respond. I ignored that feeling. I didn't even go into bitchy mode. But I feel like if I keep doing this, one day I'm going to be sat across from him and be like, we don't know how to communicate.
It all comes out then, doesn't it? Again, like you said, when you sit on it, inevitably when the actual conversation's actually had, all of a sudden, rather than talking about what's happening right now, you're talking about that text from 2 months ago. I mean, that's something I've really noticed as well. All the things from last year that Andrea and I weren't addressing as part of our relationship. Because again, we were still learning those skills last year, very early days. He was dating someone else. And all the things that went unsaid, on my behalf and his, all those things, they are still haunting us now.
Yeah.
We still have conversations in June 2018 about things that were happening in March 2017.
Holy crap.
Because I didn't talk about them then, and neither did he.
Yeah.
And for me, that's been the most powerful learning, really, is to see that actually by not talking about it at the time,
you make it bigger.
I buried it under the soil. I mean, I see it a bit like a garden analogy. You bury it under the soil, you can't see it, it's doing no harm, it's forgotten about, but all it does is poison the soil so that actually in the future, things can't grow as well.
Yeah.
We're very aware of that. We talk about that all the time, but I despair a little bit at how broad that poison spread, really, just by not dealing with it there and then, by not tugging that weed up, not doing the work, digging the roots out there and then, it's spread a lot further and wider than it should have done.
Yeah.
And that's what I think it's about, gently teaching yourself and learning through talking to people and listening to stuff like this and reading books to see actually how can I start dealing with these things. And like I say, look at the loss and the fear, which very naturally sits underneath so much of this, and that's okay. And being gentle on yourself, saying, of course I'm a bit scared of change, and of course I'm a bit scared of loss. Anyone that says they aren't, is nonsense. But sharing that vulnerability, the most powerful moments Andrea and I have had when we both gone, I'm just scared of this changing. I love what we have so much that when you meet someone new, or when I meet someone, even when I meet someone new, I'm scared of the impact that might have.
Yeah.
Because I'm hoping that we have something very special for a long time, but hopefully we have to own that fear and just say, actually, do you know what? We're good as long as we keep talking about this stuff, the difficult stuff.
Yeah. And I think it's so funny because for me, that was the most, shocking part is I talked about this particular instance with my best friend, Amy, who has been on the podcast a lot. So people are familiar with Amy. And she's looking at me like puzzled because she also knows this friendship very well. And she's like, I don't know what to tell you. And I was like, well, it's so funny because just in her eyes, because her and I do have the communication and like we've established every way of getting over our challenges or frustrations with each other as different people. Just in the way she looked at me, I was like, I saw the fact that I was ignoring the blatant and obvious fact that the relationship had changed. The one I was so worried that would change if I addressed had changed by me not addressing the issue.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? It's fascinating. It's fascinating when you can take a step back actually and see that is something that happens when you don't look at these things at the time. But it's okay. It's okay to not want to. Yeah. Like we said right at the start, we all do prefer to feel great and loving and loved and wonderful, but the bad feelings are, on the other side of that is the good stuff.
Yeah.
Like you say, and if you do ignore it, then the change is happening anyway. The thing you fear is just happening in the background anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
And often you then get to absolve yourself of the mistakes by saying, oh, well, you changed, you changed, it became a problem because of this. And actually it's like, own your part of it, actually, and taking it steady on yourself while you figure it out and on the other person. Mm-hmm. Because we are all still learning, it's just a constant journey, I think.
It is. And I think it's for me, that was sort of eye-opening as well, the fact that I don't know how open he is to self-awareness and stuff like that. And I think that might be a challenge too, if someone's in a relationship or in a, whatever kind of relationship they are in, and feeling like the person opposite isn't open to these kind of conversations, that could be a massive hurdle.
Absolutely. Yeah. How do you have a conversation with someone that's not willing to have a conversation of that type?
Yeah.
And I guess all you can do is say that I would prefer to communicate and interact with you in these ways.
Yeah.
And I guess if you can't, and those things really aren't negotiable for you, or they're not things that, from a values-based perspective, you can really let go of. I mean, we're talking about core values of honesty,
trust, openness,
authenticity.
Yeah.
Then actually, is the relationship really one that is serving you?
Yeah.
And serving your life if you can't be true to yourself in that? And that's really hard as well.
It is, because then you're actually dealing with loss.
Yeah, exactly. You're looking at it straight in the face and saying, we might have to change this.
Yeah.
We might have to change this in a really permanent way.
Yeah, and I think that, all comes back to, I think, we were talking a lot about the bad feelings and the consequences and the root fear, but we haven't yet addressed the fact that it all comes from a certain expectation of, generally expectations, the expectation of what this relationship means or what it brings or what it is or what it's meant to be or what you expect from it. All those expectations are often left unanalyzed
and unspoken and unquestioned, not questioned.
Yeah.
I mean, I've certainly got a very live example of that with the end of my marriage. My divorce process is going through at the moment, and Mark and I separated 1.5 years ago. But there's still the hardest thing for me, the most difficult part of my changing feelings about Mark and my changing feelings about that relationship were because I didn't expect to be feeling that way. Mm-hmm. You don't get married thinking it won't work. Mm-hmm. I had I had very hopeful and wonderful and loving expectations about Mark and I being together forever.
Yeah.
It's really hard, even if you're the one that changes and you're the one that actually thinks, you know what, I don't think this is right for me anymore, for all sorts of very valid reasons. It's still really hard. And I think that's something we really have to acknowledge. It's just that loss and change can be difficult.
Yeah.
There is no getting away from that. But what he and I have been able to build now is this really great, honest friendship and kind of really close co-parenting relationship that I would argue is so much more positive
valuable
and beneficial to both of us than how we communicated and related when we were married, because we just, the change changed us.
Yeah.
for the better. It might be seen by a lot of people, the end of a marriage is always bad. Loss like that is always bad. What about your children? What about this? What about the promises you made? And some people I know, they still won't speak to me because I didn't keep that vow. The vow is the vow.
Yeah. And I think that's so ridiculous.
The expectation was there, you made a promise, and that's that. Regardless of whether your feelings change, you made the promise. And I think actually, promises and expectations, it's about, for me now, managing, putting change there in the middle and saying, I expect this to change.
Yeah.
And is the change to always be a better thing, but I'm not going to be fearful of talking about things that might hint at the possibility of a change that is a little bit sad for one or both of us.
Yeah. And I think, it's funny you should bring that up, because I think we talked about this in the last episode, but I have this very particular vision of marriage from just my parents' marriage. And I was 9 when they divorced. And I remember distinctly, and I have very few memories from childhood that I sort of kept. I don't know why. Maybe a question for therapy. But but this one particular memory is very vivid, of my dad sitting us down and being like, all right, we're getting a divorce. And my feelings of like, thank fuck. Just wow. You guys came to that conclusion now? Like, it was such an unhealthy and toxic relationship there. It's like, they were wonderful parents to us. Like, there was nothing, I can't say anything about that. But their relationship was so...
It wasn't a functional relationship.
No, and I was 9. And I could see it for a while. And I was like...
this whole idea that we stay together for the kids think everything's fine. The kids, your children know. If you're not happy, your children about it, and they feel that. And actually your emotional honesty about the fact that actually this really hasn't been a healthy functional relationship for a long time must have been really powerful for you, actually, to have them own that and say, actually, do you know what, this isn't working, and this is what we're now going to do about it. And I'm not saying it's not difficult. Of course it's difficult, but it's still better than the alternative, which is pretending that relationship is a model for a healthy one.
Exactly. And I think growing up without a model is much better than growing up with a very dysfunctional model, because then it allowed me, it allowed me growing up to get, his perspective, her perspective, and my own perspective. Like, I could make my own. There were just options. They weren't the way. They were like, all right, so this is how I dealt with divorce, from my mother's perspective. This is how I dealt with divorce from my father's perspective. This is how they, their own emotional lives have evolved in very different ways. But neither of them were, both of them were very sort of like, we fucked up. That was the message.
Really powerful, actually, to see that, I guess.
Yeah, because I was like, okay, so it's fine to fuck up. And
it's okay to make mistakes, and it's okay for change to happen. And I think I feel the same way. Mark and I have managed this over a long period of time now. It's been a couple of years kind of unraveling our relationship and creating a new one. Mm-hmm. And I'm really hoping that what we've modelled to my children is that change is okay, that actually living by your values and living true to yourself is more important than being held to a promise you made 10 years ago when you were a different person. Yeah. And that promise isn't not valid. It's a valid promise made in a valid way, but it's okay to change.
Well,
and manage it in a way that's not harmful, but it's okay.
Mm-hmm. How old were you when you got married?
I was 30.
Okay.
And I'd been with Mark for a couple of years beforehand. So when we separated, we literally had just celebrated our 10th wedding anniversary. And we were talking as friends on that occasion, knowing deep down, both of us, that we were literally weeks away from agreeing to separate. Yeah. And we had a great day. I think that was probably one of the highlights for me, celebrating that day together and actually really honouring the time we'd had. And saying, you know what, this has been really special. Mm-hmm. It's been a really special 10 years of my life, and we've created a wonderful, beautiful family together. Mm-hmm. And actually we always said to each other, let's make a divorced relationship one that everyone envies. I want married people to basically envy the friendship and relationship that we have separated, and that's it was a bit of a kind of not a helpful way to frame it, but I just wanted people to see that actually it's, you can create something beautiful out of the ashes of something else.
Yeah.
That and to model that to my children as well. The change can lead to better, but obviously there is no denying that it was difficult.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, my parents still don't speak to each other, and it's been over 15 years that they've been divorced.
Wow. And that's probably because, again, like expectations. I mean, I would say all the difficulty I experienced was because I was so devastated that my expectations of how I was going to feel and what my life would look like were no longer the reality. And it was the same for him. He thought we were done, you know, he thought we were fixed for life, all together. He thought his life would look a certain way, his family life would look a certain way. And it was those dashed expectations that caused the pain. So if we'd been more aware, like we both are now, I mean, his new partner, they were in a monogamous relationship, and they're talking about these things. Yeah. So they're consciously monogamous in a way that he and I never were. Yeah. And I think that's where you get to manage the expectations and say, and that's what minimizes the toxic pain later.
Exactly. And I think that's very, it's very important to have that, that the fact about expectations for me, and this is why I asked you how old you were when you got married, is because like I sort of try to imagine when I sometimes have conversations with either of my parents and try to understand where they're coming from in bits where it's not instinctive. And I'm like, you were 22 when you made that promise.
Yeah.
Like, how are you expected to hold, like, no. Even now at 28, I feel like I'm 17. Like I could never predict what I'm going to be like in 10 years or what I'm going to feel like or how I'm going to uphold any of the responsibilities I put on myself. So that expectations from the get-go of, you know, the system we have in place are so unhealthy in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about going in there knowing that, you know, you commit to each other regardless. You know, the friendship's there and the honesty and the kindness is there. And that's how you navigate. For me, it's the kindness, really. You navigate those difficult feelings and the change and the fears and the expectations by being really kind to yourself and really kind to the other person and say, look, you know, going through a difficult time, or we've got some difficult things to talk about, but be super gentle on yourself and super gentle on the other person as well. Yeah. Because, you know, we're all figuring this stuff out. You know, me in my early 40s, I promise you, I'm still making the same mistakes and fumbling through in the same way that I was at 22. It's a different set of things, but I still make mistakes. And there's a wonderful quote by the German poet Rilke, which is basically, you know, life is all about being defeated by greater and greater things. Yeah. You know, so it's about making mistakes, but just different sorts of mistakes. Yeah. You know, that's okay. Yeah. Difficult, okay. You know, it can be dealt with, and actually, it is almost the point of life is to keep working through these things. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to not, like, because I think that we put a lot of value on hindsight and like maturity and, you know, like you'll know when you're a grown up kind of thing, or you'll know when you go through this, or you'll know when you have kids, or you know, and then you're like, what? No, let's like scrap those expectations that you'll know, because you won't.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that's you're always learning, and things are always fluid and changing. I think what's key, and we touched on it a bit earlier, is those values. And for me, it's like values-based relationships and connections. So you're always going back to this core set of values that are your touchstone, essentially, for navigating all this stuff. And for me, they're things like honesty and authenticity. And they are really core things, and kindness that actually can help you when things are tough. Yeah. You know, really kind of know to try and at least act from the best place.
Yeah. But those things are also scary when they're new. Like I was telling you, I've just been sort of getting to know someone who's very open and has, for a guy my age, like worked exceptionally hard over the last couple of years at getting to know himself and getting to know his tools and mechanisms and whatever, working on it. And it's actually like quite scary to be faced with someone who's like, let's practice what we preach, you know, like, and I'm like,
wow, yeah, absolutely.
And I'm like, okay, this feels really great. I'm terrified.
Absolutely. And I still, you know, I love being on the other side of those difficult conversations, but I still don't like having them. I think the point where I'm like, yay, difficult conversation time. Oh, wow, difficult feelings. I'm not sure I'm ever going to be like, yay, I feel crappy. But, yeah, you know, the thing is it's knowing that the sun shines on the other side of the showers, basically. I think that's important to remember.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think also not to Like this is I think something you repeated a lot, and that I repeat a lot to myself, is like, be gentle with yourself. Like that's the only thing you can do is do your best.
Yeah.
However,
right now, do your best where you are right now. Like I say, I really know that I can do better, and I'm hopefully getting better at this, and I can certainly see progress, which is great. And we acknowledge that again in the relationship. We acknowledge the progress we've made in communicating with each other. However, I do very much also acknowledge that I'm, still making lots of mistakes, and will continue to do so.
Yeah, but that's the important bit. It's like, okay, well,
that's okay.
This is all I can do. Like in that moment in time, this is what I did. So therefore, either I learn from that, or I recognize that I'm not able to learn from that just yet. Or I think it can sound so freaking fluffy. This is what, pissed me off before. I was like listening to everyone talking and using big words and, putting labels on nice, pretty things and putting a bow on it. And I was like, yeah, right. But in real life, and I'm like, actually, like in real life, it's the little tiny steps.
Yeah.
Of exactly that text that I should have sent, saying, hey, this makes me kind of uncomfortable. Can we unpack it? As opposed to then it turning into what it's going to be now of me having to sit someone down and saying, listen, we need to talk. That no one likes to hear that sentence. Like,
I know. I try, and again, I've learned the hard way that you have to kind of introduce that kind of subject. It's often a big trigger for people, because most people as children have heard about divorces in that way. Have heard about difficult things. The dog's died, or our marriage is over. With that sentence. So again,
that even in dating,
I'd love to spend some time with you. And talk through some things, or let's go over a couple of things. There are gentler ways of going into that, definitely.
Yeah, and I think that's like the easiest sort of little tools.
And framing it as you're doing it because the person's important to you. This relationship's super important to me. You're really important to me. What we share is really important to me. It's really valuable, and therefore that's why I'd like to spend some time running through a couple of things that have happened recently.
So that I would feel less bad feelings, so that I would feel better. So you can help me feel less bad feelings.
Yeah, we can work through that together, and address the difficult feelings the other person's got as well, because invariably they're there.
Yeah. So I think, I'm just like, thoughts.
It is, isn't it? It's thought-provoking stuff. I think it's that sense of learning all the time. And I think that's just the big thing I've learned really is that you are just always learning.
Yeah, and applying that to everything.
Like, God, I handled that really well. There are moments where I go, do you know what? I just handled that super well. It's about going over that. So what did I handle well today? Or what have I handled well recently? And what can... Again, it's looking at your successes as well as your failures and learning from those, and say, actually, I handle it well when I do these couple of things, or when I create an environment that looks a bit like this. And certainly, I've had a lot of advice about, if you're talking about another person, for example, and that might make your partner uncomfortable in a non-monogamous context, to basically to use, lots of kind of, to talk about the time you spend together and the importance of that relationship before you then start talking about another one, so that you're cushioning that feedback about someone else with a reminder of the importance of the original person to you.
Oh my God, I'm so bad at that.
Yeah, it's about kind of, softening it and putting in plenty of reassurance and kind of kindness, because people tend to remember the difficult stuff more readily than they remember the good stuff. So it's about really over-egging the good stuff sometimes. Yeah. To then have a difficult conversation. Again, with your friend, it could be about, this friendship's really important to me. Mm-hmm. You are really important to me, and that's why I wanted to see you.
Yeah, and I think it's funny how I'm just coming across this because I asked one of my friends to be on the podcast.
Okay.
And she's very self-conscious about it. She got married very young in this day and age, and so but she's super happy in her marriage. She's just kind of like facing society and being like, people are like, you got married at 23, like, why would you do that?
They're very judgmental, can't they, about something that was the norm even 20 years ago?
Yeah. So now you can't win, even if you're doing the norm or.
Yep.
And so.
Crazy.
And she said to me, she's like, well, I feel very self-conscious after listening to your podcast with Anita, because she was like, I feel like, first of all, she was like, I don't feel qualified. And I was like, no, none of us feel qualified.
Gosh, gosh, no, absolutely. There's no point where someone says, you've got it now. Absolutely. No, it's a really important thing to say. None of us ever feel like we're experts, not really. Even the experts don't feel like that.
Yeah.
There's one by Brené Brown recently that I read,
Yeah.
and she's saying exactly the same thing. It's that sense of, actually, in the minute you do start thinking you know it all, that's usually when you take a tumble.
Yeah, exactly. And then the second thing she said it's really difficult to talk about happy relationships.
Interesting.
She was saying, like, she doesn't like rubbing it in people's faces, like, look at my perfect life and look at my perfect marriage. It's just like a difficult topic to bring up without raising sort of bad feelings in other people.
Yeah, which we often want to avoid, don't we? Because we know how bad it feels for ourselves when we have difficult and bad and shitty feelings. So the last thing we want to do is create that in other people. And again, that's that pattern of avoidance where, because we don't want to, we're trying to protect other people's feelings, so therefore we avoid and repress. But like we were saying earlier, that's often when things then get worse later.
Yeah.
So whatever kind of benefit you've got in the short term from avoiding having to have that difficult conversation, you invariably just make it 10 times as hard to have that conversation in a month's time or 6 months' time or even a couple of years down the line. And actually, interestingly, most marriages end and one person's really surprised.
Yeah.
There's always one person that's really surprised and the other person going, but haven't you noticed that I've been really fucking pissed off with you for the last 10 years?
Yeah.
And you're like, no, actually I didn't. And it's like, whoa, actually that really isn't ideal, because there's been a whole pattern of withholding and withdrawing that, really conversations could have been had a long time ago.
Yeah, and this is why I thought it would be super important to have that podcast with her. Hint, hint.
Yeah, get involved, it's fun.
It's because I think we're bitter enough, like we're scared enough where, we have enough of the bad conversations, like in the rhetoric of like, this is what you do when it goes badly. We don't talk about this is what it actually looks like to have a healthy one as much, so I think that it would be really nice to hear.
It'd be really wonderful to hear about that, like what, how a healthy relationship looks and feels, and the fact that actually difficult feelings are still part of a healthy, positive, great relationship. I certainly know that, I would say that Andrea and I have a really successful, very happy relationship, but we do have to navigate some difficult stuff in the context of that. And actually it gets healthier and happier and better every time we deal with some of the big stuff.
Yeah, and personally, I would love to know what that looks like in a normative sort of relationship that they didn't have all the trial and error that you and I might have.
Navigating a new framework and therefore, had that kind of to work with.
Yeah.
They've got married very young. So how do they make that work? That sounds like a really interesting topic of conversation, definitely.
Yeah, and so I think the more we talk, the better we feel, like in general about everything. So I mean, that's a convenient point of view also for us running a podcast.
We can talk about difficult feelings for 40 minutes. I think it's great to say that actually talk about difficult feelings is a really good idea, but it really is. It really is. And I think start small, start slow, be gentle on yourself. Don't go in saying, right, we need to have this big conversation about difficult feelings right now.
Yeah.
Have a think about it. Look at some stuff of your own first, and then maybe, start small. I would always say with difficult stuff, feeling it for yourself, but also discussing it with another partner or even a friend.
Yeah.
Taking it gently, taking it slowly, and tackling it a piece at a time.
Yeah, and I think that's actually, if you're not even ready for that, then just come to our social on July 5th and discuss it.
And you can meet some people that are trying to navigate the same things.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Great. It'd be great to see people there.
Yeah, it would be lovely. So thank you so much again for this other episode, Anita. It's always a pleasure.
Absolutely. It's been good to talk to you.
And we look forward to seeing you guys in London, or get to us on Twitter at...
I'm Anita Cassidy 76.
And I'm Christine Wild _ and we look forward to hearing your thoughts about this one. And if you want to share your experiences or your difficult feelings, we're here for you. Talk to you guys soon. Have a nice weekend. Bye-bye.
The podcast you just heard was recorded with Anchor. If you want to make your own, download the Android or iOS app completely free from anchor.fm/podcast. That's anchor.fm/podcast.